I am Mary Monday, the co-founder of Greener Glenview, along with Sherry Latash, and we welcome you all to the launch of our free food scrap drop-off pilot program this summer in Glenview. We want to thank the Judy Beck Family Foundation for funding this program for Glenview residents. We also want to thank our partners, the Glenview Public Library and Glenview Public Works, for agreeing to host sites for the drop-off bins. And we thank Collective Resource Composting Cooperative for working with us to conduct this pilot program this summer. We also thank you all for coming tonight. I hope all of you have gotten a copy of the survey. Please fill out the survey and leave it for us at the end of the evening. So, and now on to our speakers. I'll introduce them all before we begin. Amy Bartucci here founded Go Green Park Ridge in 2013, and she is the administrator for the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition, a statewide nonprofit that is advancing diversion and composting of all organics in Illinois. Amy serves on the board of the Illinois Stewardship Alliance that works for a more just and regenerative local food and farm system. She's also on the Chicago chapter of the Climate Reality Project, where she serves as a steering committee member on the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. Amy will talk about composting and why food scraps are not garbage, but are instead a valuable resource. After Amy, I'll step in to briefly explain the inspiration and the goals behind our program this summer, and then we'll hear from Mary Beth Shea. Mary Beth is celebrating her 14th year with the Collective Resource Compost Cooperative, where she is now a vice president. Collective Resource Compost Co-op is dedicated to mitigating climate change through landfill use reduction, commercial composting, and zero waste education. Mary Beth is a climate reality leader and has been awarded the Governor's Environmental Hero Award for the composting program she set up at her daughter's school. Mary Beth will speak about how commercial composting works and how you can participate in Glenview's pilot program. The next speaker will be Jeff Green. Jeff is a Valley Low resident and a climate activist who will speak tonight about how composting has made a difference in his household. After our free drop-off pilot program ends, after about 12 weeks or sooner, depending on how quickly we spend our money, Jeff, you might want to sign up for a subscription to a composting service, as Jeff already has done. Mike Ellis is our final speaker. He's the director of sales at the Mulch Center, and he will speak about using certified compost in your landscape and garden. He has real life experience of the benefits to soil and the environment of using compost rather than fossil fuel-based fertilizers. So please welcome our speakers.
Is this working? Can you hear? Hi, everyone. Over there too. I'm sorry, the podium's here. I'll try to scooch closer to my friend. I want to give a little context and then get into the why and the ways with composting, but not to go into more of my bio, but just a little bit about some of us up here and how familiar we are in Illinois doing this work. So Collective Resource Compost Cooperative, Climate Reality Project, and Mulch Center are people I talk with pretty much every day of a work week. Is the administrator for the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition, which has been a statewide organization for just about 10 years officially. We're doing the work so that municipalities can do what you're doing. We're trying to have the story told and have people network, and understand the science and the why. So all of these people here, and as well as advocates like you, are doing the work to be able to see a thriving compost industry. So a couple of things that I make sure I mention about the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition is that it is building this industry literally by people power. I am one of 2 staff members, and the rest of the organization are our members and our volunteers who do the work. So this is new to the structure of the coalition, as it had been run by a board, volunteer, and then 1 staff member for the majority of its lifetime. So I have been employed and working alongside somebody as the executive director for 2 years now. So this is something that you can see as like a birthing of something bigger. And it was a great idea 10 years ago. The other side of the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition is not just building the community and the work in the state, but it is the diversion of the food scraps and all organics from landfills in the state. So what you're doing here in the community is important to the work that we learn about and we talk about and we problem solve about constantly. So the diversion of this material is super important to see so that we can have an advanced industry. So Mike can sell the compost and we can see this come back to our gardens. As a little bit of a background too, I just wanted to mention, we used to be called the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition. And there was a time where the conversation was about all organics, which meant yard waste. We know green waste from our yards is part of making compost. I wouldn't be able to make compost without my own leaves from my trees or pine cones I toss in my bin. So the industry and the coalition and the community decided to expand on the title and use and composting. So it's a little cumbersome, but we are keeping our same brand and colors, but we just added and composting. So we're the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. What that does mean too is that new in the industry is compostable products that are considered material that commercial composting does accept. So all organics could be some of those materials that help you have a sustainable party. And Mary Beth can talk about that because that's part of the commercial side of the work that I do. Raise your hand if you're a gardener in your yard already. Awesome. Hands down. What if you have a spot in a community garden? Okay, most of us have the access in our yard. Helpful for me to know because I do believe in composting for all, like literally because you have a yard, you have a privilege to be able to do this. And at the same time, you could also do some additional work to divert more materials than a backyard would be able to handle. But new is this drop off and access and respect for people who may not have the yard to be able to turn their own pile or do the work. I'm a backyard composter, so most of my experience is, I did clean my fingernails today, but literally digging in my own pile. And I wouldn't have it any other way. To me, I grow food and I want to see that come back to my own food and nutrition so that that's the core of the work that I do in my yard is so that I can have healthy food seasonally with my family. It also helps my mental health to be in my yard. But I know a lot about and also want to uplift the larger side of our work because the commercial industry is what's going to help more of the product come through Mike's business or other businesses similar so that our job is to use compost. And if we don't have access to that material, there's going to be an obstacle in having legislation say that we're ready for it in the state. So we'll stay away from the legislative side of things because it could be a whole different panel, but I just want to make sure you know my vision as a backyard composter is that everyone sees themselves in composting somehow. You could be that resident who wants to, similar to me, have your own pile and work on it because you grow food. But you could be an educator in a school and you want to care about it for your students or the families. You could also care about it because your lunchroom needs to have the diversion going on there. Business owners, nonprofits, legislative lawmakers should be seeing themselves in this work because without that, our climate is going to be suffering continuously without us making those levers of change. So I'll spend a minute on the benefits, but then I definitely wanted to get more into the food side of things with preventing the waste in the first place, but also understanding that we all have this capacity. So for those of you who are backyard gardeners, you'll already know this, so I won't go into full detail, but the benefits of compost are so amazing that we call it black gold. We also consider it like the actual thing that will help agriculture in our state. You've seen the stories about our soils. You know that the farming that exists here is not the one that we're having our compost industry get that end market. And we need to have specialty growers and farmers changing the food system with this in mind. So keep these things in mind when you know that this is a backyard option and this is also a community garden option, but this at its largest, highest level at scale is good for food feeding people. And that to me is a very important thing, which is why that whole circular food system is the way I live my life. So compost on a garden helps retain water. It's something that I was using today, and in my pile, it felt fluffy and it wasn't soggy. It was done correctly because it was able to have that time, whether it be water or space or turning and oxygen. We made our own compost and we're starting to get it in our gardens throughout my property. I just added some on top of a new planting area because I realized that that area looked like when it rains that the soil runs off. And I said, I know that compost reduces soil erosion. So I added some of my own material there to reduce the soil erosion. At a large scale, we know that compost helps with sequestering carbon. And you want to make sure that those brown leaves and things that you have on your property are going right back into where you live or your community exists. At the large scale too, I have other slides from presentations, but you've seen what a landfill looks like. And if you haven't, please look it up. But when you look at that landfill and you know that food is sitting in there at high rates and large percentages and creating greenhouse gas emissions, you're going to want to understand what the compost industry can do for your future. Because if you look at a photo of the compost industry, whether it be graphic or actual people doing this work to change our food scraps into compost, you see thriving, living, happy people. You see green jobs. You see something that you don't actually have your hands in right now because it isn't at scale, but we're at the beginning of it and it's super exciting. So the landfill waste, obviously, with our climate crisis is causing this new, I'd say, lift in understanding what we can do with something so valuable. Mike will probably also get into this, but the reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers is huge. It is huge. Just sifting compost on your lawn, if you have one, is a replacement for fertilization at the conventional scale. Keeping soil alive is the whole tenet of compost. You want to make sure there are all those microorganisms breaking down the food in a pile or in commercial activity for the next part of that product to come into your life. I want to pause for a second. I want to make sure I'm not running out of time. I tend to speak a lot, but I gave you a little bit of background on the coalition. And I talked about why it's important to the state and for each municipality like Glenview to be able to do this work. In Park Ridge, there were folks that said we wanted to see a tick in the amount of people that were using our commercial subscription service. And so we've made it the year of composting in Park Ridge. So I'm super glad to be sitting here with my friend Mary Beth and others as well to be able to talk about my favorite topic. The coalition itself has been able to provide this information similar to what I'm doing this evening with you all, but we are open to communities to be able to come to our calls and be educated on what it is that the municipality may need or a resident may need or a nonprofit or a business. So please just check out some of the materials in the corner over there in regards to the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. But I definitely want to make sure that the connection about what you're doing with food scraps is not overlooked by the fact that we need to prevent food waste in the first place. So just like we're all learning about recycling and that reuse is higher, best value when you're talking about items. You want to be able to consider in the compost world the same thing about food waste prevention, meal planning. Just because you have access to compost doesn't mean it's the best use of that valuable food and the nutrition that went in and the resources that went in to create or make that food. So I have some of the flyers over here. I wanted to make sure you all understand the work of the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition is open to everybody. And at the same time, I'm here with colleagues to be able to tell a story so that Glenview could be successful in what they're doing. I'm super proud you're involved, and Park Ridge is not too far away, so we're learning around the same time. So thank you so much.
I'm going to speak pretty briefly about what exactly our food scrap drop-off program entails. First, it will start July 7th. That's a Monday, the first Monday in July, 7/7. Glenview residents will be invited to drop off their kitchen scraps in bins at 2 locations in the village. One of them will be here at the library, somewhere in the drive up to the library, and the other will be at Public Works, where currently Glenview drops off Christmas trees and holiday lights at the winter holidays. So what is a food scrap? Food scraps that will be accepted are vegetable and fruit peels, dairy, meat and bones, fish, snacks, grains, basically anything that you scrape off your cutting board or off of your plate or remove from your crisper that didn't get eaten and is now slime. All of that can go into these bins. And so what you'll want to do is collect this stuff instead of throwing it into your garbage, which is probably what you usually do. You can have a container. So when we buy our snacks, they come in these handy containers, and you could use one of these. Or you could use, we are raffling off tonight, some very nice countertop compost bins. However, you can use yogurt containers, all sorts of things to hold these scraps. And then you would take them to the bin, take off the lid, dump it in, take it home, rinse, and repeat. So that's how it will work. Instead of, So here are my notes. Collective Resource will then, Mary Beth's company, will come and switch out the containers and replace them with power washed, fresh containers with a new liner weekly or as needed. We haven't done this yet. We don't know how exactly it will work, but that is the plan. You'll hear more from Mary Beth about what exactly is allowed and not allowed in the containers. So then we come to registration. We would like very much if all of the people who participate will register with Greener Glenview. You go to our website, the composting page is there, click on Learn More. We will have a register button up later, and then fill in the information. Why do we want you to register? Because there may be schedule changes. Our budget may not last as long as we anticipated because we might need more pickups. So it's very important that you know when the program will end. Also, there might be some contamination issues. Maybe people are unclear about what to put in there. We want to let you know so that we can have the cleanest possible food scrap collection. There will be other issues that come up, and if you are registered, we will keep you informed. Also, we have incentives for registration. There will be a raffle of the first number, we haven't decided how many, to raffle off an additional countertop container provided by Collective Resource. Also, everyone who registers will be invited to come to Collective Resources Spring Compost Gift Bag for a 5-gallon 5 gallons of finished compost. You will need to bring your own bucket. So what inspired us to do this? Other municipalities are doing this. Glenview's composting services are limited. You can compost through Groot, but in order to do that, you have to live in a single-family home. You have to sign up for the annual yard waste service, which is a charge. You have to get the 95-gallon bin. So, and it doesn't accept as many things as Collective Resource does. Also, our neighboring communities are doing much more in this regard. And our goal is to allow everyone who lives in Glenview, whether it's an HOA, an apartment, a condo, currently not served by the Groot waste hauling contract, we want you to be able to compost. And so we want to give as many residents as possible the ability to divert food scraps from the landfill and create nutritious compost. And now we'll hear from Mary Beth.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. So I have this little cheat sheet because there's all these questions I'm supposed to answer. So starting with the history of collective resource compost, I was chuckling when Amy was talking about the name of IFSCC because our name is so unwieldy. It started out as collective resource, but everybody was calling us collective resources. And then we thought, well, maybe we should put compost in the name because then people will really understand what we do. And that didn't solve the problem of people calling us collective resources. And then we became a cooperative. We became an employee and community-owned cooperative. So then we added that to our name. So it's completely unwieldy. But so our founder, Earlene Howard, started this business because she was solving her own problem. I think that this happens a lot with entrepreneurs. They're frustrated that they feel like they need something and the service does not exist. And so 15 years ago, she was living in a condo building, so she didn't have any outside space to have a compost bin. And there weren't any services like ours then. And she had what she calls her light bulb moment, which is if composting were easy, more people would do it. Some people are agreeing, thank you. So in a sort of field of dreams, sort of, she thought, if I build it, they will compost. It didn't exactly happen that way, but 6 months after she started, I met her and I was totally on board. And in that instant, our sales force doubled. So in the first 6 months, so Earlene was using buckets just like this one and putting them in the trunk of her Camry and hauling them to basically a transfer station. And so it took her, all of this like history stuff is very top of mind because last week was our 15th birthday. So 15 years. So the first 6 months, it took Earlene her first 6 months to divert 1 ton from the landfill. Routinely, we divert 8 tons a day. So it really has grown. And to date, we have diverted 15,540 tons. And we have, Mary's applauding. We've always, tons are kind of hard to imagine because we don't really deal in tons that much. That's 31.08 million pounds. So that's the answer to A. So Mary and Sherry wanted me to talk about other drop-off programs that we've helped to start. So the first one, we actually didn't start, but it was some high school students in Evanston where we're based, got a grant from, I believe, the EPA. Or maybe it was a USDA grant actually. And they came up with this program called Cookies for Compost. So they set it up at a community center in our town, and using us, they gave all the participants a 5-gallon bucket that they would fill at home. And then on Saturdays, and just Saturdays, was when how they were doing it, you could come in and empty your bucket and get a cookie. So that was Cookies for Compost. And what's great about that is that, they got a grant for that program, but then the community, or the city of Evanston, took it on and decided to pay for it. And so that's the first drop-off that we helped with. And what's really interesting is that drop-off inspired Skokie to do drop-offs. And Skokie's program is like, I don't know, 12 times bigger. I mean, it's like exponentially bigger and more successful, because they really put their money where their mouth is. And they started, I think, with 6 or 8 sites in different parks around town and at municipal buildings and at City Hall. And they've expanded it to 12 sites. It was so wildly successful that they were spending so much money on it that they had to put it out to bid. And unfortunately, we lost that bid. But we were very happy to help them start that program. We just recently started a program in Park Ridge. The Park Ridge Sustainability Commission decided to pick a couple of locations in town and start a drop-off program. So that just started, and now we're going to do Glenview. So we talk about, so the totes, I brought a tote so that you could see exactly what it looks like when you're looking for it for the drop-off program. And it's funny, if you live in a multi-unit building, it's like a condo or an apartment building, you are in effect, if you're using our program, you're in effect doing sort of a mini drop-off program, because you're not using your own container, you're doing it communally. And we love that so much that we actually rebranded those as neighbor totes to just give people the idea that you can do it together, and together is better. It's actually less expensive to do it together. Okay, so how Glenview's pilot program will work. Mary talked about that a little bit, but there will be bins in 2 different locations, and I think there'll be a list there, but there's definitely a list on our website. So the one thing that we've been going back and forth with, and I think we have decided that to begin with, pizza boxes are not going to be accepted because they take up so much space in these communal bins, and really the food scraps are the point. There are all these other things with commercial composting that you can compost, but really the food scraps have the most nutrients and are doing the best work for creating compost. The locations you talked about, so the library and Public Works building, and as Mary said, our program is called Container Swap. So in a lot of waste hauling situations, they take a container and they tip the contents into a truck and leave the dirty container. It has always been our model to swap it out with a washed out container. We think that it's just more successful. And let's see. So yes, we're gonna swap those out weekly. And the what goes in, you talked a little bit about that too. So people who've composted in their backyards sometimes kind of hold back in what they can put into our bins. And with commercial composting, they're industrial processes. And so there's just, like when we're talking about composting, it's bigger piles that get hotter, that get processed, that ground up as part of the process. And so we can take more things than you could put in a backyard bin. But not produce stickers. You want to take off the produce stickers because they do, if they're plastic, they end up in the finished compost intact. It's amazing. You've probably seen this picture of our finished compost gift bag. That's me and Amy on top of the pile. I have a cowboy hat. So it was at a gift bag like that we saw one of the stickers intact in the finished compost. So pickup schedule, we haven't figured that out because we just found out where the other location is. It may be the same day, but if you register, which we are very much encouraging you to register, because it will give us a way to communicate with you, which will be beneficial to all of us. So you register with Greener Glenview, but if you're at the bins and you see any problems, our customer service number is listed there, and we want you to call and let us know. If you see that there's a lot of spillage, or if the bins are full, we want you to tell us that. And we have, it's open Monday through Friday to call customer service. Where the food scraps go. So there are 3 different commercial composting projects that we haul to. One is, and they actually all 3 have different ways of managing the food scraps. The one that we've been hauling to the longest does windrow composting, which is like, piles that kind of look like Toblerone candy bars, only bigger and full of food scraps and finished compost. And then there's a project called Green Era, which uses a anaerobic digester to create methane gas, so capitalizing on that natural gas. And capitalizing on that process. And then the one that there was a picture of, and maybe Mary, you could point it out when it comes around again, is Patriot Acres, that's in Des Plaines, and they use yet another system of composting called aerated static piles. So in the windrow process, they have these machines that go down the windrow and grind things up and aerate them, turn them just like you would in a backyard bin pile. But in aerated static piles, it's exactly what it sounds like. The pile stays put and they force air into the pile. So those are the 3 places that we haul to. Yes, participants will, you have very, very shrewd negotiators in the Greener Glenview. They were like, but can they get finished compost back? So yes, you can come to the Talking Farm in Skokie is where we usually have these community events where we give finished compost back to our customers. And this is the first drop-off that we're offering finished compost to the participants. So hats off to these guys. Let's see, but you gotta register to get the finished compost. So do you want me to talk about our service?
Do you want people to put their food scraps into a container like a bag or anything, or just dump it?
Repeat the question.
So Mary asked if we want people to put the food scraps into a bag or not. You don't want to put them in a petroleum-based bag in the compost bin. But if you have a compostable bag, you could do that. You can use paper bags, and it's kind of like whatever you want to do is how we'll accept food scraps. But you never want to put contamination, which is the waste industry's term for when you put the wrong thing in the wrong place. You never want to put any of those petroleum-based bags. So if you bring it in a petroleum-based bags, we're talking about perhaps having a garbage can there that you could dump those in. If there isn't one, please find another place other than our bins to put it. So do you want me to talk about our 5-gallon bucket service, or are you gonna talk about that?
I can talk about it.
Okay, so we'll let Jeff do that. I talked quickly, and I answered all of my questions. So I'm gonna hand it to Jeff so that you guys can ask more questions at the end.
Take this.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. So first of all, thanks to you all for coming tonight and showing your interest in composting, because it's a really important adjunct to the way we manage our households. For me, I'm talking about my personal composting journey. And it all started back just before we closed down for COVID. And I went to I was manning a table for one of my climate groups at the Lakeshore Club in Wilmette. They had a big sustainability event there where all kinds of groups were putting up tables and talking about their various aspects of sustainability. I was there for climate, and I found the collective resource table. And once I found out about it, I immediately signed up. Because for me, composting kind of represents a couple of things. It represents acting about climate change. It represents getting rid of methane gas emissions. And if many of you may know that methane is a much more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's over a 10-year period, it's about 80 times more effective at trapping the Earth's heat, which is a bad thing. And it's also about soil, because I know Amy was talking earlier about how the fertilizers that are used on our crops are not good for the soil. They're petroleum based, they come from fossil fuels, and they are degrading the soil to the extent that we get the kind of dust storms that happened in Chicago not too long ago. And those dust storms are basically the result of soil being so destroyed that it blows away, just like the Dust Bowls in the 30s in Oklahoma. There's nothing different about that. So composting is a way to address a lot of these things. And keeping food scraps out of landfills is really important, because methane leaks out, a huge amount of methane leaks out of landfills. Whereas composting, both anaerobic and aerobic, both capture almost all of that methane. They're 5 to 15 times more efficient at capturing the methane and keeping it out of the atmosphere as is putting it in a landfill. And we can see that, not too far away on Willow Road, you can see there's a landfill and you can see pipes coming out of it that are venting methane. They're trying to capture that, to burn it. They don't do such a good job of it. So composting is a way of keeping that out. So that's kind of what prompted me. Was maybe more of a climate-based solution or a climate-based path that I took that many other people, but it was important to me. We have been getting these 5-gallon buckets in our house for a number of years now.
Cue the 5-gallon bucket.
This baby here lives under our counter. We have it picked up every other week. We fill it with our food scraps during the 2-week period, and shockingly, it does not smell. I was floored by that. I was waiting to, have to start lifting up the lid of this very gingerly and backing off and kind of tossing food so I didn't have to get too close to it. But none of that is necessary. It really has almost no odor at all, and certainly it's not offensive. And we've had it in our kitchen for years, and it's great. So there's really, it's not a beautiful thing to look at when you look in the bucket, but when you realize the good that you're doing and the fact that it's really not intruding on your olfactory senses, that, you know, it's really quite tolerable. There's no lifestyle change that was involved. We don't keep our food scraps in the refrigerator or freezer because, like I said, there's no odor to it. It's just the easiest thing to do. And with the collective resources, picking up the containers and swapping them out for clean ones every couple of weeks, it's just a wonderful way of contributing to replenishing the soil and keeping dangerous greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. So it's just, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a great service. And those of you who have backyard gardens, you know, that are going to do this in your own yards, that's also a great method of, you know, again, keeping methane out of the atmosphere, protecting the soil, and, you know, improving your own gardens. So I think it's just something that we should all be looking into, and I hope a lot of you, after the period of the pickups in Glenview is over, will sign up to do it individually or work on a community-based pickup, just to keep this really great process going. So that's how I look at it. I was going to talk about human composting, but they asked me not to. But I am looking to that as an end-of-life solution. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Thanks very much.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. What you're doing is very commendable. I work for the Mulch Center. Okay, the Mulch Center does a lot of screening and grinding with the Organimix people over at Midwest Organics, the Crown family. With the composters, they have a problem, and it could be pretty much described as this: the loop doesn't get closed. Okay, and that's why I'm here. I know Midwest Organics, I speak to them quite a lot. Can't take in tons of food scrap. Okay, because not enough compost is getting pulled out of there. The Crown family covers all of their farms now with compost. So what are you saying, Mike? We need to start pushing compost out into our public works, into the park districts, and make it mandatory. Hey, if you're going to dig a hole, you got to put in some type of compost amended topsoil. The easiest way to think of it is, this is recycling. If you get a Coke can, you throw it in the bin, it recycles, you got a Coke can. You get a plastic bottle, you throw it in, recycles as a plastic bottle. When you throw pork chop in there, it doesn't come back a pig. Okay? We have got to get compost used. We sell over 20,000 tons of compost a year. It's 20,000 yards, basically. If it's about a yard weighs about a ton. But to put it into perspective, everywhere compost goes, mulch can go. Okay, basic same. We sell 20,000 yards of compost. We sell 500,000 yards of mulch. A lot of them to you people, your friends, your landscapers, the public works, the park districts. They're not buying the compost. Part of this whole thing to close this loop is going to be pushing on our village representatives, our county representatives, the state representatives, that you want compost to be used in soil. We sell a planting bed mix. It's about a third compost, then it's sand, topsoil, and that. Lurvy buys it from us. I mean, they're huge. They buy it, Fiore everybody buys this stuff from us. It's one of the ways they can do it. Otherwise, I see the composters pushing back because I told this would be a good one and drive all the villages nuts. You can bring in a ton of food waste, no problem, but you gotta take 2 tons of compost out with you and just force the issue. Or we can force the issue locally. You know what I mean? We can start talking to our reps in that. No more do we want fertilizer out there. A third of fertilizer comes out of China. A third of it. Also too, June 5th, if you go back a little bit, there was an agro-terrorism hit. They got 2 Chinese residents at University of Michigan. There's these blights that they can do to like wheat and corn and wipe out crops. Who knows what could happen in the next 10 years, them shipping fertilizer. They've been trying to wipe us out. These things are going to occur. So if we use compost and get away from the fertilizer, I think you have a huge, huge movement. And you can get that done. You got Costco's, Woodman's, they're shipping out, they're turning, I don't know how many tons, probably at least a ton a day out of a Costco of food waste. Part of that's prep food. You go to the hotels downtown, same thing. They're probably a few tons a week. Where's it gonna go? And that's where I'm getting at. So how can this help? Push on your legislatures. Like I said, we sell compost amended stuff, top dressing. Waukegan uses compost because their lawyers told them they were going to get sued by 3-eyed kids. I was in the meeting, and they do 800 cubic yards a year at that sports complex on Green Bay Road, and the 800 cubic yards. It's 800 tons. That's a lot. And they put it down 40 tons an hour. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to help you guys. Our business is growing like that on this end. It's one of the drivers throughout everything, but people need to start to demand that of their governments, demand it of themselves. You can put down about 3/8 of an inch at the most across your grass. It'll grow better than any of the fertilizers you've ever put down. 3/8 of an inch of compost. Just throw it down, throw a rake over it. Grows beautifully. That's what Waukegan does with their partners at their soccer fields. There's 16 of them. They do 8 a year, 106 yards per field. You can put it on in the fall is when I recommend it. Put it down on your gardens, on all your flower beds, around your trees, everything. Put it down. You don't have to till it in. It'll leach into the ground. Put down 2 inches of it. You don't have to fertilize that for 2-3 years. You throw your mulch on the top of it in the spring. You're going to mulch again anyway. Throw the mulch on the top. Mulch helps to hold the water in. Doesn't feed it like the compost will. But what are we creating is this suck for compost. Also, now we need to get more compost. Well, we got food scraps. We got to get food scraps in there. We can throw food scraps. We're making room for these things within the economic system. Because if there's not a way to make money on it or somehow relieve costs, they're not going to do it. It's what worked in plastics. It worked in aluminum. It worked in paper. Anything that's recyclable. So what we got to try to do is get that push. And it's so easy to use. There's 3 little buckets over there, orange buckets. They have compost in them. All right, it's commercial compost. Don't play in it. You can put it down with your turf spreader, your fertilizer spreader, walk behind. You put it down with that. That's how fine the stuff is now. It's beautiful to work with, simple, and you get out of fertilizer and you become more green. Because the fertilizers out there, are gonna be bad. And food waste, which is wonderful about it, in the composting world, is like rocket fuel. Okay, because a lot of grass is in there, yard waste, leaves, you hear all about that. Food is like rocket fuel in compost. So there is a huge advantage to being able to get it in there as well. But if we don't create the part that's going to pull compost through, you can't push anymore through the system. Where are you going to put it? They're going to stack it up and make landfills out of it. They'll just be compost fills. That's all. And so to get away from that, let's push on these guys. We spoke at the Butterfly Gardens last year. Last year was 2 years ago, Larry. Were you there for the? Yeah. The next day, Glenview Park District called me, you need to come down here and talk to us. Same conversation went on. We sell a lot of stuff to the Park District, not compost. So that's the push. I mean, there's so many things, and they're wonderful on how do you use it, you guys and all you're doing and everything. And there's this one part. And we see it only because we work with Midwest Organics. Other than that, from a capitalistic pig statement, I love compost because it's growing at 20, 30 points a year for us, our volume on it. But we can't get the big guys in the game. And that's where you guys can come in. Farms, they can, the state can start to mandate things to the farms, or just take all the subsidies out of the fertilizers and put them into the compost. Everybody looks for, follow that money. Okay, it's going over here. We're going to go over there. And that's the best thing for everything that you guys want to accomplish. All of us want to accomplish. Get this food, get the waste, everything that we can out of the dumps, out of the landfills, and close the circle. And if we do that, I think more and more of us will be happy. And it'll be a better world for our kids and our kids' kids and generations down the road. When I was talking earlier about Waukegan, they tore up a golf course and they sold all the topsoil because there was good money in topsoil. So they sold it. And then nothing was growing. Their fields wouldn't grow for soccer. And they were going to start putting down more fertilizer. We'll put down more fertilizer. That'll help. Fertilizer only helps the grass, the plant. Doesn't help the soil. Depletes the soil. You got to put compost in it. The attorney walks in, and I'm in there with their superintendent and the park district and everything. He says, "What are you guys talking about?" And he says, "Yeah, well, compost and or fertilizer, because it's a little more expensive compost." He says, "Listen, we're not really sure what's going to be in these fertilizers that you got. No one knows the impact. But 20 years from now, you're going to get sued by three-eyed kids." That's exactly what their law team told them. They said, "Okay, let's go with compost." So I think if we look at these things and really how the things go, this is a great opportunity. You guys are doing a great thing. You're moving everything in this direction. As it gets there, we got to figure out how do we keep the thing circling around. And that's where the private sector can come in and help. Because if there's money to be made, they'll take a jump at it. It's got to have that though. And it's going to be pushed on these governments at all levels. Township, we got what, 4 levels we can go after? Village, township, county, and state. They all started using it. Thinking about 3/8 of an inch, that much, over 100 yards is, it's good. On a football field, it's going to take 100 yards or 100 tons of compost. If you start thinking about all the parks and everything else we got out here, it's the way to go. Absolute way. But if we don't close that loop, it's not going to work. It just, you have too much compost. Did I finish in time?
Yeah.
You guys can yell at me if you
We're
want.
so succinct.
That's it for me, Mayor.
Oh,
right, so now we have come to the question and answer time. The microphones where everyone can hear the question.
Thank you. My question is, I'm maybe a little confused, but when I think of compost, I think of leaves and grass and all that other stuff, but you keep talking about just food scraps. Can you distinguish between the two, or is it all the same?
Oh, who should take that question?
Just fire away.
It can
Right
all-
now, most compost is yard waste. Food can be added into that. And that, food can be added into it. And that's where we're talking, why I was talking, the composters are full. They would love to add food waste into it. If we can pull get the compost moving out. The food waste is a superior nutrient. It'll make the compost even stronger and more viable for use. And they're combined. Right now, a lot of them are doing it, but it's a small percent of what they can put in. Because they're not getting a lot in as well. Would that about cover it?
Can I answer?
I can't resist saying what you're saying, but in a different way, is that food scraps and compost give soil superpowers. It's the same thing, but yes, anything organic can biodegrade and become compost.
So I can bring my grass and throw it in that here in Glenview.
We encourage you not to do that. I mean,
That's my point.
yeah, no, I mean, but in composting in general, yes. There's a lot of grass that is composted, but this is specifically to help people compost their food scraps. This program.
Can I just mention? Sure.
Just, that was a very good question and it probably was on me to give a better explanation. Because of the fact that there is a recipe for that breaking down of the nutrients, you do want to make sure whatever the model is. Mary Beth was describing the 3 outlets that Collective Resource Compost Cooperative uses. And the concept is the same, that it's like a recipe. So in the backyard, it may be different. Mary Beth and Glenview here are describing how to get food scraps diverted from landfills, but it does not become compost in that bin. It is an entire industry doing that science with the leaves, the branches, brush, and all even soil to be added back in. So it is definitely like a recipe that each of the outlets need to be able to be good at communicating to reduce the contamination so that the science happens well. So it was a good question.
And just as another part of the follow-up, if you're composting at home, if you're using one of these buckets, and you have some plant trimmings from your house, they can go in the bucket. You know, I mean, when you get down to it, what's the difference between that and throwing some spinach that you didn't need in there? So the idea of the yard waste, I think it's more of a volume issue that you can't, you know, use these containers for. That's why it's geared towards the food scraps. But again, the number of things that you can put in these buckets is quite long. It's a long list. And, you know, you do well to go to Collective Resources site and take a look at all the things that can be composted. It's, you know, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I assume you said the meat, I don't know, meat could be, but like, let's say it's creamy chicken or a piece of chicken skin, so it's raw, I can put that in. Because that would smell.
So you can't eat it. It's possible, like I'm saving up some compost, some food waste for when this starts. And I have small containers of things like that I just put in the door of the freezer to keep it there and then, yeah.
Right, and so Jeff was saying he just puts stuff in his bucket, but there might be some managing that you want to do for yourself. You know, we're swapping these out weekly to begin with, but you could dump things in there every day if you wanted to. You know, so if you had something that you wanted to get out of your house, you can put it in the bin, but it probably would be better if you froze it, just for everybody's comfort.
And just for that question about how to make compost, don't put meat and bones in your backyard pile.
Right. Just got a question.
Just wondering, what efforts are being made to enlist the more than 300 cafes and restaurants in Glenview alone for their food waste?
I think that might be a question for Greener Glenview, but I will say something that we didn't bring up in this panel yet. Through the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition, one of the keystone projects was to try to have restaurants be able to understand their position in the compost industry. And there's a program that's a free recognition program that Mary Beth and I know a lot about, to be able to promote the businesses, nonprofits, institutions, and schools are on our list as well, who are doing the work, and it's called the We Compost Recognition Program. I have some little cards back there that can be used as like a leave behind card. Please feel free to take a few, and if you go to an establishment that you want them to know about composting and Glenview's enthusiasm behind it, write your name on there. They'll be able to get in touch with me at the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. But that is the work that Mike is talking about as well, to do the Park District schools and have this market become a thing, and the restaurants are part of that, to be able to see them in this too.
One thing that Greener Glenview has done is that we referred a composting service to the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce next weekend is having their Summerfest celebration. And so this composter, the name of their company is Waste Not. They had reached out to us, and so we put them in contact with the Chamber of Commerce. They will have a booth there, and they will have some bins. So the entire Summerfest is not going to be composted. He'll have 4 bins at the booth, and so you can bring your leftover potato chips and leftover hot dog, whatever that you didn't eat, and compost it at the booth and get information from him. Also, where we have a collective resource, does have at least one restaurant that you pick up from, isn't it Allison Friends?
Yes.
On the Glen. So, so we have tried reaching out to the chamber to do an event, to talk with them, and it could be that this might well be a way for Greener Glenview to start talking with the business community in Glenview to see if they can up their sustainability game.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Wait, can I answer that restaurant question? You guys are better salespeople for the businesses that you give business to than we are. You know, of course, we want them to compost because that's what we do. But if you're a regular at a restaurant, you know, you have a good leg to stand on to say like, hey, I know this thing that composting is good for all of us. Would you consider even doing a little bit of composting? It doesn't have to be like every one of their food scraps. A lot of restaurants will start just with one bin and, you know, see how they can work that into their process.
On the compost, the finished product, like, they'll say to us, well, you're better off going to a farmer's market than to, not better, but than the grocery store, because you're dealing with the farmer, you can put it in a paper bag and take it home with you, so you cut out the plastic waste. On the compost end of things, it seems like there's a chain of distribution that you're dealing with, where you get the compost from and then who you sell it through to. As a consumer, if you have any suggestions for, if I say, okay, I want compost to put in my little patch of North Valley Low,
where to go and not, and what to look for, is it like, is all compost created equal, or is some
No.
stuff that I'm gonna get in a bag coming from China and I don't know
Yes, I do, because it's us. You are gonna get those coupons. You can go on mulchcenter.com. We do 140 deliveries a day, 7 days a week to residents in Lake County and Northern Cook County. So we're there constantly. All of our stuff is bulk. We don't bag anything. So every item you'll see, the screened compost, the depending on what you're using it for, there's the top dressing mix, the planting bed mix, all can be delivered to your house. They come in various size trucks. You can get a semi of it, whole semi be wonderful in your backyard, or all the way down to a little pickup truck with a dump on it. And you go online and you can do it that way. And there are a lot of other places like nurseries and that sell it that way. But yeah, ours is very, we're retail, we're residential friendly and landscaper friendly. So that'd be the easiest. Now, compost. There is such a monster out there called mushroom compost. And everybody's of age, so that's just horse shit. Okay? It really is.
Literally.
It is literally, it's the bedding from a horse farms and that. So it's horse crap, pee, everything in the straw, and it's toxic as all compost can be for a while. Then it breaks down and that. But if you use that, you're generally going to kill your plants. 2 years from now, you'll have the greatest flower bed ever as it degrades and that. So you have to know how to use that. It's like if you're like dealing in drugs, you cut 1/10, so 10% of that to 90% capsule. Not that I have experience, but it is a hotter, more toxic product. But if you do it right, now like out west, the western suburbs, we've got guys that buy some of them 700-800 yards of that stuff already. Because they know they use it like more like in a farm situation, bigger area. You get into the coastal suburbs, there's not enough land for you to till 3 yards of this stuff, and it's that hot. You guys basically bury it a foot deep and hope that everything survives.
So I'm going to ask him to clarify. There are so many pictures on the back of this coupon from the Mulch Center. So when you're talking about compost, you're talking about screened compost.
Screened compost right
Correct?
there.
Yeah, it's the second column, fourth picture down.
And there is mushroom compost on there. I just, if you don't know how to use it, don't. It's dangerous.
Can I mention something real quick with the mic?
I heard somebody mention grocery stores. I thought it might be. Right. I don't know the answer for Glenview specifically, but if we can take a small little commercial break about grocery stores and the industry. The future is going to rely on large retailers being able to divert their food scraps from landfills. And there will be a time where everyone as a citizen can be engaged in advocacy to try to make sure our large retailers are prevented, meaning by law, to have a diversion plan so the food doesn't go to the landfill. So keep your eyes out for conversations related to legislation. Mike was talking a lot about how we need that to ignite a very positive and successful compost end market. And at the same time, the actors who are wasting food need to come up with a plan because they have money. So large retailers will be the first to be in a tiered approach legislatively for the state of Illinois to be required if legislation comes to fruition. So this past year, feedandconserveillinois.org was working on that to be able to have at the state level by law, large retailers required to have a diversion plan. And you will see that again in 2026 legislative season. So keep your eyes out on it and keep talking about it with, Mary Beth was talking about restaurants, and an option can be not everything, but maybe something back of house. And retailers can try to find the best use for food as well. And it isn't only compost, it's food rescue. So the idea of prevention I was talking about, make sure edible food gets to people first before a compost facility is really important to everyone to understand too.
I just wanted to add something to the grocery store conversation. So we've been in business for 15 years, and it's only in the last year that we have started doing any work with grocery stores. We have an independent grocery store called Harvest Time in Chicago, a food co-op in Chicago, and 2 different Whole Foods in Evanston and Park Ridge. So it is, I mean, they're starting to come on, and we're not servicing them, but a lot of Aldi stores are starting to compost. I'm not really sure how they're rolling that out, if they're in our area yet.
It's mostly DuPage County.
It's mostly DuPage County, said Amy, the expert.
Some of us live in condos, and we actually, in our bylaws, we're not supposed to compost. We're not supposed to do food scraps. How, is there anybody who comes out and will talk to our board to try to change their mind about that and make, have us get involved in doing this the right way?
Yes, I can't say that we would come to a board meeting, but I do think that we can talk because there's a blog post on our website about how to have a food scrap program to your apartment building and condo. So I recommend you read that on the IFSCC website, but also so that you know, you can't have that be the closed door, knowing that, and if there is, a hauling situation to be able to pick up the yard waste from the condo unit, that's one thing, but if the landscapers are taking it away, you are probably going to need a smaller service, something like Collective Resource Compost Cooperative and others that would be able to manage that, because I can imagine that the conversation is different if they don't even have a contract for yard waste because they're working with landscapers. So there is a blog post, so you can take a look, and Mary Beth has more.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that is composting on site, that stipulation is not a compost service. It depends on when it was put into the bylaws, I'm guessing, but, right.
They didn't even want you having food scraps composting on our balconies or whatever.
Right, so it probably is for on-site, like what Amy was talking about, but I'm happy to talk to you about all the condo buildings that we work for.
Anybody on the panel, and maybe Jeff in particular, have you found that, or what have you found in terms of the benefits of composting sort of on your grocery purchasing, consumption, anything that you would say as a side benefit in the household?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's made a huge difference in what we purchase, but I think it's wonderful that on those occasions where something goes bad, you buy some raspberries or strawberries, and a couple days later, you're picking through to throw out the ones that are no good. They go in the compost. They don't go in the garbage. And when you go to throw out the garbage once a week, it's like 75% lighter than it used to be, and it doesn't smell either because there's no food waste in it. So I think it. I'm not sure what effect it would have on the purchase end, but you certainly feel a lot better putting it in a compost bin, knowing it's going to be turned into something that is valuable for the soil, rather than throwing it in the garbage where it goes into a landfill and becomes methane escaping into the atmosphere. So yeah, I mean that's one of the real benefits, because everybody has stuff in their refrigerator. I know my wife, there are corners of our refrigerator that I'm afraid to go to. But with a compost bin in the kitchen, you could address that issue also.
So when I first started composting, like 14 years ago, when I met Earthy, the founder, I used to, as a sort of desperate mom who had to make, meals around the clock, I used to buy a lot of rotisserie chickens. And we didn't eat that much of the rotisserie chicken. I mean, they're not that good, really, but when I put my first one in a bucket and realized how much real estate it was taking up, I was like, no more rotisserie chickens. So that was something that changed for me. I just stopped buying them.
I just wanted to ask Mike, when you talk about municipalities or park districts, big entities that are resisting using compost, is that just out of habit that they'd rather go to fertilizer, or is it that they don't? I mean, it's not like compost is a new thing, so what's the reason?
I think
It's money.
it's two. So money, it's always money. And the switch over to compost is going to be a little more expensive on the front end. Remember, you put compost down, it's 2-3 years before you put compost down again. Fertilizers every year. And we're finding that a lot of them just don't grasp what the compost looks like, because they don't think it looks like what's in your buckets. They think it's muddy, it's like, big blobs and things, and how am I gonna put this down? And it's like, no, this stuff is spreadable. This is nicer than pulverized topsoil. And then they start to see it and use it, they'll get there. But a lot of them just don't know, or don't know how to apply it. And we've been trying to, I meet with these guys. I spoke in, what was that, Swelco Swank thing? There were 65 municipalities on there. I spoke in front of them. They just don't know. And we're trying to get them that information and that, and still that it's a wall. But if it's pushed from the other side, hey, we want this, as well as, we're coming at them, hey, here's a great thing to use. I think it's gonna go a lot farther, because right now they don't budge. I mean, there's a handful that are really doing anything. Didn't Glenview run a park? One park that they decided to use compost in instead of fertilizer. I thought it was Glenview, Elgin, and Waukegan does it, a bunch of them.
The golf course,
The golf course?
I think
Okay.
it was, or is that North, but it's North Shore Country Club. Is that a Glenview golf course? They are, yeah.
But there was a park district thing that was doing it as well. That's why I bring it up. It's just hard to get them to convert and look, and it's the way to go. And that's gonna come from the groundswell, I think.
I just asked Mary for one quick minute before I know she's gonna give some closing remarks, but I wanted to give an idea to Greener Glenview and everyone in the town around the seasonality of pumpkins. Is a great time to be talking about composting, and there's these things that have taken off across the state and across the country, which are called pumpkin smashes, but it would be a good idea to get these conversations even in your community. If you haven't organized a pumpkin smash, it's something that we have on our website. I also wanted to say a huge thank you, because it's my role as the administrator to thank our sustaining members of the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. And the Mulch Center is one of our platinum members. If you can't tell, he's very versed in compost and the industry. And I wouldn't be able to do my job unless there were Mulch Center mics. And then Mary Beth with Collective Resource Compost Cooperative is a gold sustaining member. And thank you very much for doing all that you do to support the work that I do for IFSCC. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers. Thank you all for coming. We are going to be closing up so that they can wrap up the recording of the program. The recording will appear on our website and also on the YouTube channel of the library. So thank you all for coming. Please do turn in your survey as you leave, or leave it on the back table. And please do register and start composting this summer.